Welcome to WebHunga. Today we are going to see higher order components. So what's an higher order component? Higher order component is an advanced technique in React for reusing component logic. See, the other definition is a higher order component transforms a component into another component. So you need to remember these two words. So one is reusing and the other is transforming a component into another component. Now we can just look at the basic layout of an higher order components. So as you can see on the screen, this is the basic layout for a higher order component. So what we basically do here is we are reusing a code and we are passing in or transforming a component into another component. Alright, now let's look at a bit deeper on this higher order component. So we are exporting a function or a component reuse code. Within this reuse code, we have the original component parameter. So what is this original component? It is the component that you are passing to this component. And then we are transforming that component into another component. Notice that the another component is returned. And inside here, we are using the render method to return the original component with some props. You could understand it better with our live example. But for now, you need to remember this layout, and I will go over this once again. So we are using a component functions for getting in an original component, and we are going to return the same original component with some props. So this is the whole, this new component is exported as another component. Now let's look at a live example. So this is an example. So in here, it's a very simple code where we need to increment the counter. As you can see, this counter is incremented by a click action, and this counter is incremented by a hover action. The fundamentals of both this are the same. So we need to show a count and it needs to be increased on an event. The only thing differ here is the type of the event, that is either click or an hover. So these two can use the same logic or the fundamentals that can be used to increment and show the numbers. Now let's look at the code for building this. Let me just zoom out a little bit so that you can understand it better. Take this out. Alright. I guess you can see the whole code here. So what you see on the screen is the counter 1 and the counter 2. So the counter 1 is the one we have an on click method, and the counter 2 is the one we have on mouse over method. So it's basically the click 10 items or the clicked items is the counter 1 and the hover item is counter 2. Alright, now let's look at the counter 1. So the counter 1 has a button, and on click of this button there will be a function passed to it. And as you can see here, we should show the numbers. So we are displaying the count here. So where this increment change and count comes from? So the higher order of components has the functionalities of the increment change and the count. The same goes here for the counter 2. So on mouse over, you need to show the increment change. That's the function. I need to show the numbers. Again, this having the same fundamentals and the functionalities, it will be reused from the higher order component. For the sake of simplicity, we can go over with counter 1 for now. So notice that I have made a component, or to be precise, an higher order component, and I am wrapping the whole counter 1 to the reuse code. And why I need to wrap to the reuse code? As we could see in the layout, the higher order component must take in an original component as the parameter. So we are passing counter 1 to reuse code. Now we can just move on to the reuse code. So this reuse code, as you see on the right of the screen, is just the same layout we saw in the other page. So we are using the reuse code, and we are getting the original component or the parameter that was passed to the reuse code, that is the counter 1 here, as you see on the left. So now moving on to the reuse code, we are getting the counter 1, and we are just returning the counter 1 with some props. Right? Could you see here? Yep. It's going to be very simple. Once you understand this higher order component, it's going to be very, very simple. So as we said earlier, this original component here is nothing but the counter 1. This counter 1 is returned with some props. So what are the props required? So right now in here, when we click the button, there should be a function, and we should show a count. So these are the two fundamentals that we need to pass as in props. Okay, so the count is exported or passed as a props using the count, and we are passing this .state.count value to it. So we are defining a state where the count is 0. So this .state.count correspond to this value, right? And increment change is a function, and we are calling in a function this .increment change. As you can see, increment change is a function, and what it does is it's using the set state property to increment this .state plus 1. So this is very, very simple code. We are passing both the count and increment change to another component. So basically, when you import the reuse code, these props are available here. So what we are doing here is we are just restructuring the props. So what is this .props? This .props are the value which we passed here. Notice that we have passed the props count and increment change. So we are using the same here, const within a curly bracket count and increment change equal to this .props. Again, this .props is the props value we passed from the reuse code. Alright, and now our job is to just display on the screen. So we are displaying the count, and on click we are using the increment change function. So this count correspond to the count on the reuse code, as you could see here, because it's just the props that we passed, and this increment change corresponds to the function that we have used in the reuse code component. And the same goes for the counter 2. Just we are defining a different event method on mouse over. That's it, guys. It's very simple, a higher order component. It's just scaring you with a more fancy word, but it's very, very simple one. I hope you had understand it better and you could reuse this in your next project. Please subscribe to the channel. That gives me more motivation to make more videos. And thank you very much. Thank you, guys.